Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs Talks Music and another special episode. And please welcome back to the channel, friend of the show and frequent guest, Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation. Peter, this should be a fun show, I think. We're going to do something a little bit different tonight.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this show and always to be on your channel. Thanks for having me on.
And I have to admit, I was kind of inspired to do this show by a series of shows that Peter and I have done over on Rock Daydream Nation around Christmas time, where we compare top 10 charts for like 40 years previously. So we're going to actually be recording very shortly a show where we talk about the top 10 singles in December for Australia, the UK, and the US, and just compare and contrast. And they're always fun shows to do. So I thought, let's do something similar to that, but let's look at the 10 best-selling albums of all time and compare the 10 best-selling albums worldwide with the 10 best-selling albums here in Australia, because there are some differences and some rather interesting ones too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to doing a comparison.
So what we'll do is we'll just go through the top 10 worldwide, have a little bit of a chat about each of the albums, and then we'll look at the Australian one and see where it differs and where it is the same, and just talk a bit about those differences and things like that. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So, the worldwide list. The other thing I should point out before we get started is that I've taken these top tens from Wikipedia, so, pretty reliable source, and I've excluded compilation albums, so best ofs, and I've excluded soundtrack albums. So we're just looking at studio albums here.
Yeah, so we've got to say straight off the bat, there are some huge best ofs and soundtrack albums that would have made the top 10, like the ones that come to mind: Saturday Night Fever, maybe Grease, the movie soundtrack. You would have had the very best of the Eagles. I think that was right up there and the biggest
Yes.
selling album of all time. And I think one of the biggest selling vinyl albums of the last 10 to 20 years has been Queen's Greatest Hits Volume 1. So straight off the bat, those four
Yeah.
albums, we're not going to talk about them, but if we were going to
Yeah.
include them in the conversation, we would be talking about them.
Absolutely. And just so we know, for the Australian top 10, if we left in the compilation albums, we would have had not one, but two ABBA best ofs in
Of
that top 10.
course, yes, yes. Well, that basically resurrected ABBA's career in America, because ABBA in the 70s were a one-hit wonder with Dancing Queen. They were much more of a Euro-Australian phenomena, and I think it was that ABBA compilation album that came out in the early 90s, plus the Mamma Mia movie, and that boosted their popularity into America.
Yeah.
Rest is history.
So, yeah. So let's have a look at the worldwide top 10. We'll start at number 10, get up to number one. I think most of us are going to know what the worldwide number one bestseller is, but number 10 with 33 million sales worldwide is Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette. That one surprised me a little bit. I knew that was a huge album, but I didn't know it was top 10 huge.
No, I knew it was uber huge. It was a phenomena, and I think it really spoke to a generation of women, and sort of, basically, it's a very much a personal empowerment album, and you've got to understand that there was a bit of a generational shift in female role models. So in the 70s, you had your Pat Benetars, your Blondies, and also in the pop world, you had Madonna. But this particular album had a lot of angst, and it was all about personal relationships, and it was all about independence and personal empowerment, and it really spoke to that generation, especially of females in the early 90s, and crossover into the males. I can tell you You Ought to Know was played in clubs everywhere. It was a crossover hit. So people were
Yeah.
actually dancing to this music as well as listening to it. And I think you got to understand these albums are big because it's not just music fans like us that purchase this. It goes to our mum and dads, to our sisters, to our brothers, to our neighbors. It's a crossover, and this album did. And one more thing, it was bled all over radio, played to death.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't just You Ought to Know either. It was like One Hand in My Pocket, and there was Ironic, and there was a number of songs on this album that just got played to death on the radio.
Yeah, but it's very much a cultural timepiece. I don't think it's sort of resonated today. I think people look at it as a bit of a like a fossil. There are some albums that tick over and go and go and go and go, and they go and get passed to the next generation. My feeling is this album was very much a snapshot in time, a lightning in the bottle, and that can be sort of amplified by her subsequent albums, which didn't do as well. So
Hmm.
I know the next album could be considered a failure, and because it only, if you've sold 33 million, it's a really tough task to beat that. I call it the Fleetwood Mac Tuss syndrome, following up an uber successful album with something as big. But yeah, look, I think it's kind of dated. It's very much at that time of the early 90s. Would you agree? It really hasn't sort of translated into modern times, and it's not really a cross-generational album.
Yeah, it's a bit of a time capsule, isn't it? It sort of screams early to mid 90s. And yeah, I don't think it definitely hasn't. Like, I don't think you hear a lot of those songs on the radio now, like on classic rock radio and that. So yeah, I think it is a bit of a time capsule album.
Do you like it? I do get a little roused with You Ought to Know. It's got a little bit of oomph, and I
Oh
can
yeah,
feel
it's
I can feel the anger, and it's got a lot of spirit. I don't mind that song at all, but some of the other songs I thought were a little bit iffy, like the really bad wordplay with ironic, which was a bit of a joke at the time about Alanis really didn't understand what ironic was. Well, maybe she was being ironic about not understanding ironic. Um, yeah, there is some charm in this album, but yeah, it is a time capsule. Do you actually like this album?
Um, look, I don't know the last time I actually listened to the whole thing. Um, you ought to know, yeah, it's got attitude. It's a bit snotty and that sort of thing, and I love that about it. But One Hand I always kind of liked, One Hand in My Pocket, and but even that was a little clunky lyrically. And then Ironic, yeah, as you say, that got sort of like mercilessly teased at the time for, all these things that were just coincidences and they weren't actually ironic at all. But yeah. No, look, it's not the worst thing out there. There's albums in this top 10 that I think are a lot worse than this. So
Yeah, I'd
we'll
I'd
get to
say
those.
I'd say the lifespan of this album, where it was red hot, was a period of 3 years, and then it sort
Hmm.
of went cool. So that might be a
Yeah.
thing that we can talk about as we go through the albums. Ones that were
Yeah.
just red hot at the time, but have just sort of cooled over time and not so relevant. And that one I think is kind of cooled
Yeah.
off. It's not really a relevant album. It's much of more of a timepiece.
Yeah. So at number 9, we've got the only artist that we're going to have on this list twice, and that's Michael Jackson. And at number 9, it's Bad, and it sold 35 million copies worldwide, which, you know, not to be sneezed at, but then when you compare it with the other album on this list, it's a big come down. But I mean, I think most artists would kill to sell 35 million copies worldwide, wouldn't they?
Yeah, yeah. Look, this is the album that I was a bit shocked when I saw it, and oh, more so the appearance of Michael. There was a change of style of music. It became a little bit more clinical, a little bit more synthetic. I kind of like the R&B stylings of Quincy Jones and Thriller, and we will talk about that, or I hope we will talk about that
Mm.
being on the list. But I found a lot of the songs on this album to be a little bit more clinical, a little bit more synthetic, and really wasn't in my sort of groove. But I was taken surprise at the image that Michael had chosen. He was trying to go for a bit more of a tougher look, and that's the thing that I sort of remember. Relevance today, I'd sort of say that's cooled off because I
Mm.
think Thriller is still hot. There's a musical, you hear it on radio, but I think the songs on this album, you hear it occasionally, but I don't think it's as hot as it was. So a bit of a time capsule, maybe.
Yeah. Um, obviously he was trying really, really hard to follow up Thriller, wasn't he? And I don't think he necessarily played it safe, but I think he definitely, I mean, Quincy Jones was still involved with this album. It's the last one that he would do with Michael. But I feel like, yeah, I think it suffers from just being a little overdone. Like they spent so much time, Michael was so fixated on making an album that was even bigger than Thriller that I think, sometimes, the old cliche, less is more. And I think sometimes, bands will overwork these albums that are supposed to be follow-ups to huge albums. And I think there's definitely, I still think this is a good album. There's a lot of songs on this album I like quite a lot, but you know, it was never going to be as big as Thriller. And yeah, I think that's probably my problem with it is just that they probably spent too much time and it ended up getting overproduced.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things here. I always find that some artists, when they're on the rise before they hit their peak, they're at their best artistically. Now, he came out the other side because Thriller just won everything, and he was just, regarded as the king of pop. So he was in a very rarefied air. And I don't know, there's a certain sterile coolness about this album. It's a little bit too synthetic to me. I don't think it has as much heart and warmth as Thriller has. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
there's a bit of a coldness about it.
yeah, and I think my point is that I think that coldness comes from the fact that they overworked this album. They overproduced it. They put so many layers on it that it just ended up becoming a bit of a blancmange. And yeah, I think that's what it was just, too many cooks spoil the broth, too many tracks ruin the song. So I think that's probably what it was.
I love it. Blancmange. That's going to be our. That's going to be in your frill tape. Great, good stuff. Yeah, I think we're on the same track on that one.
All right. At number 8, I was actually a little bit surprised this one wasn't a little higher up in the list, actually. Led Zeppelin with the Untitled, or what's mostly known as Led Zeppelin 4. Not my favorite Led Zeppelin album by any stretch, I have to say. But obviously the album they're best known for.
I love this album. It's right near the top. I had a barbecue on the weekend. I I got it out, put it on the turntable, and everyone agreed, all killer, no filler. Love this. This is like the probably the cassette tape that was being circulated in my high school. A good 15 years after Led Zeppelin released this album, just to show how relevant and hot they are. This is a hot album, meaning it's generational. So it was
Yeah.
hot in 71 and it was hot in 1984 or 83 when it was circulated in cassette tapes in my school, and it's hot now. I love it. And I think it's classic. It's a 10 out of 10 album. But the problem with Zeppelin, there's a lot of 10 out of 10 albums. They're that
Yeah.
high quality.
My problem with this album, and it's a me problem, it's not a Led Zeppelin problem, is just overhearing. I don't ever need to hear rock and roll again. I don't ever need to hear Stairway to Heaven again. I've heard them so many times.
Really?
Um,
Really?
Black Dog, I can still hear that. I can still really
Uh,
enjoy that song. But those other two, like, I was never a huge fan of rock and roll. I think it's a bit
oh, it's got
generic.
No, it's got a lot of charm. That song, it's a bit of a throwback song because Zeppelin and especially Robert Plant love to get their old '50s mojo out. You know, a little bit of
Mm,
Jerry Lee Lewis, have a bit of a Little Richard, and this is like he's tipping his hat and having a little bit of a homage to the old time rock and roll. So I like it.
yeah,
Stairway to Heaven, I still get a shiver up my spine where Jimmy Page does that wonderful solo. you know, and you know, I learnt it on the recorder and piano at high school. I think every
mm,
high school who did music, the teacher would get out the Stairway to Heaven sheet music and make the kids play it. So maybe I've got a little bit of an
yeah,
entry point on that song, but a lot of
yeah,
charm on this. I love the acoustic pastoral numbers. Shows the love of Robert Plant had for Joni Mitchell. Actually, I think him and Jimmy love Joni Mitchell. Oh, I love it. I think it's a great album, great barbecue album, and
yeah.
yeah, good
Oh, it's
timing.
still a
Yeah,
really good album. It's just, as I say, for me, there's a little bit of familiarity breeds contempt, and there's other Led Zeppelin albums I like better. But I mean, it deserves to be on this list for sure.
it does. And it's on this list, folks, because it's a cross generational. One passes it on to the other. And look, how many bands did this album spawn? Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
Now,
deserves.
our number seven, our number seven, number six, and number five have all basically sold the same amount. They've all sold about 40 million copies. Number seven is an album I think you could argue is cross-generational, but it's an album that really has the older I get, the more I sour on this album, and that is Bat Out of Hell by Meatloaf.
Never liked it. I think it. I look. It's a. I think it's a bit of a parody. Um, maybe a Springsteen sort of parody with a little bit of old time rock and roll. I don't own it. I've been bludgeoned with it. I know it. It's overblown. Um, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit contrarian, but it's one of those albums that's just passed me by.
Mm,
This is a slow burn album because it wasn't one of those ones that was an instant hit. It built up and built up and built up. And I think it was on the charts for like a considerable amount of time. So this is an album that's accrued those figures um,
yeah.
over a slow build. But Meatloaf he's a force of nature. He really
Mm,
is. And I think he's kind of the vehicle for some people behind him that are the ringmasters. And I'm talking about Jim Steinman. I'm talking about Todd Rundgren with his production. So he's kind of like a pawn in this whole record. I think there are some masterminds behind it. To me, I think this is more the Jim Steinman vehicle starring Meatloaf.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. You know, when I was a teenager, I actually really liked this album. I used to own a copy of it. I don't anymore. But as the years go on, it's one of those albums that just the older I get, the less I like this album. And it's mostly the songwriting. It's overblown, as you said. It's pompous. And there's nothing wrong with pompous in its right place, but this, yeah, it's just so melodramatic. And Meatloaf, great vocalist he was, but not so much when he did the AFL Grand Final like 10 years ago or whatever that was. But back in the day, great vocalist. But yeah, the songs, I mean the production's fine. I've always been a fan of Todd Rundgren, but it's the songs that don't do it for me at all anymore. So,
Yeah, I'm just
but
one of
it
the
is one
few.
of those albums. It is one of those albums that just keeps selling and keeps selling and keeps selling.
Absolutely, and I'm must be one of the few Australians that don't own a copy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at number six, with also 40 million copies sold worldwide, we have Fleetwood Mac with Rumours.
Oh, what a great album! That deserves every copy. Now this is truly cross generational, And I would say that this album is red hot. Now, Meatloaf, I would say it's a bit lukewarm. I think that was strong for a period, and then, sorry, I'm going back a little bit. Meatloaf was strong for a period in the 70s, and then it went wallowed for a while, and then he had the sequel. This album, over time, has been red hot, and passed on to multi-generations. It's influenced so much in regards to today's music. Look at Americana, look at folk rock, look at some of the, stars like Taylor Swift, Dua Lipa, look at Miley Cyrus. I can just see a lot of bit of Stevie Nicks. I can see a lot of Fleetwood Mac songwriting sensibilities. And this album was done under such distress because you had basically two couples in the band that were imploding. There was interpersonal relationships that, if it was a board game, it'd be called Twister, because it's hard to work out who was with who. There was a lot of coke going down, but out of it, great songs, great music, and it's timeless. So another 10 out of 10 album, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an album that doesn't sound like the work that got put into that album, because so much work got put into that album, but it sounds so effortless. It just sounds brilliant. And yeah, it was a great follow-up to the 1975 Fleetwood Mac album, which, that's a really good album too.
I think it's
But
good.
this one's better.
I think that album's good, but not great. It showed promise. It's a little patchy, but this one, oh wow, very unexpected. And my memory, I lived through this in the day. I remember this album when it came out. They were huge. And Australia went gaga over it. I think they played the MCG. There was Fleetwood Mac Mania, and it's the songs. They're
Mm,
staples of commercial radio to this very good day. And good
yeah,
songs are good songs, and they last forever.
yeah. At number 5, also 40 million copies sold worldwide. This is by far my least favorite album in this top 10, Peter. I don't know how it sold this many copies. Shania Twain, Come On Over.
Yeah, that's lightning in a bottle. That's just a moment of time. And I would be talking about a year and a year and a half where country music met pop, met with a little bit of rock. I think it was produced by Mutt Lange, and he was on a red hot streak. So whatever Mutt, touches seems to turn to gold, whether it's AC/DC, whether it's Def Leppard. But he perfected a sound that was just right at that time, perfect. Now, am I right? I'm trying to get a date. Is it like early 90s?
Yeah, yeah, sort of early to mid 90s. Yeah.
So this would have been the landing pod for all the folk that didn't want to listen to grunge or alternative music, and it was like a safe haven. Oh, it's like putting on a pair of slippers and just feeling comfortable. Oh, I'm listening
Mm,
to some music. Sure, it's beige and it's a bit bland, but I feel safe. So it's for all the
yeah.
mums and dads and the people that buy their music from Walmart and Target and Coles and all those things, and buying something really safe and conservative. And it's country music that, with a little bit of pop and rock, that's very non-threatening. It's so shiny and smooth. But alas, it was only for a year and a half, and her career didn't really last longer than that. She
Mm.
good to look at, Shania Twain. You know those. If my memory serves me right, those videos she did were like Vogue fashion shoots. So she looked
Yeah.
good on camera. She had the look,
Mm.
and that's when really it got a little bit silly with music, popular music, where the look took over the music.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know this either, but around this time when Mutt was producing these albums for Shania Twain, they were actually married.
I know. I'm aware of
So
that.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
Not anymore.
so no, no.
Look
But
that up, folks, if you want to see the entanglement of that. That's a little bit Fleetwood
yeah,
Mac.
yeah, it's got a bit of daytime soap sort of thing going to it, doesn't it? That whole
Yeah,
situation.
they
But
sort of they sort of uncoupled.
yeah, I don't like this album at all. I really don't. It's the most sort of bland, boring commercial music. It's it's country, but it's not. It's that modern country with the pop. It's not even the with the rock, it's with the pop. And nah, it doesn't do anything for me at all.
So, do you think this was a reactionary safe haven for folks that just didn't want to hear Nirvana, Soundgarden, alternative rock, and it
And
drove
hip hop.
the mainstream to something that was safe and beige, and
Yeah,
I'm just so
yeah,
relieved.
absolutely. For the people who didn't like the grunge, who didn't like the hip hop, this was obviously the album that they flocked to. And
I'll put
I mean,
another
I
thing.
wasn't.
I'll put another thing to you. Is this where the Def Leppard those Mutt Lange fans that like Def Leppard Hysteria, and didn't like Adrenalize, and then grew up and sort of went into country music? Do you think there were a lot of fans that were, metal
I
fans
have.
might have aging metal fans, gravitated to this sort of music?
I don't know. I think this was kind of contemporaneous with Adrenalize anyway. So, um, because that was an early 90s album too. So,
Mm.
but yeah, no, no, I don't like it. Number four is an album I think that divides people too in this day and age, and that is Hotel California by the Eagles. 42 million copies sold worldwide. The Eagles seem to be one of those bands that a lot of people either love or hate.
I'm not a fan. I have the album. I like it. I think Hotel California is a extraordinarily well crafted song. There are some very good songs on this album, but yeah, I think I go into the category of I'm not an Eagles fan, but I own Hotel California, and a lot of my friends are exactly the same. A lot of my friends that love hard rock, heavy metal, punk. You'd be surprised in the crevices of their record collection, they do have an Eagles album, and it's always that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because there's a little bit of guitar hero stuff going on. The production on this is just spectacular. So I think it really is West Coast produced American rock at its finest. It's just
Mm,
the sound is pristine, and whether you like them or not, you've got to admire it. I know you're
yeah.
probably not an Eagles fan, but do you admire this album?
Well, that's where you're wrong. I actually quite like the Eagles. They're not one of my favorite bands in the world, but I quite like them. I tend to prefer the earlier stuff though. By this stage, I admire this album more than I like it because it is extremely well crafted. But again, I think it's a little overproduced. I think it's a little contrived. And whereas I think they were a little more, sort of shooting from the hip in the earlier stuff, it was a little, it was certainly less produced. It was more, I think it had more feeling. I think this album is very, as I say, contrived. There's a lot of serious thought about making a big selling album, I think, when they made this album. And it obviously worked. And I still like it. I can't remember the last time I pulled it out and listened to it. But yeah, not my favorite Eagles album, but I can admire it for what it is.
Yeah, I probably disagree on that, but I like it a lot, and it's the only Eagles album I currently own. So, but yeah, Hotel California that gets played on classic rock radio, and this is another cross generational album. So I would classify this as hot.
Yeah. Speaking of cross-generational albums, my goodness. Number three, Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh, that
45 million copies sold.
keeps going. Again, there are a lot of folk, if they own one Pink Floyd album, it'd be Dark Side of the Moon. Maybe at a stretch they'd own The Wall, but I think The Wall was very much of a short period where that was a cultural phenomena, but this one is hot. It just keeps on going and going and going. It's a staple of rock radio, very influential. A lot of prog bands to this very day cite Pink Floyd. I think if there was no Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, there may be no Radiohead, there may be no Muse, there may be, it's debatable, a lot of modern prog rock, modern rock bands, alternative music. I think creatively they were at their peak, and it just showed that you could get all these diverse characters, Waters and Gilmour, together in a room, in a studio, and make great music. It's a I can say it's loosely a conceptual album. I think it's about the human condition. It's about life. I like it. I love it. Great album.
Yeah. Oh, it is a great album. It's not my favorite Pink Floyd album. I've done a Pink Floyd ranking. I'll leave a link to that in the description. But yeah, I still love this album a lot. I still listen to it at least once or twice a year, as I do most of the Pink Floyd catalog. And yeah, it's a legendary album for a reason. It is probably, of all these albums, I'm going to make a big call here. Of all these top 10 albums that we're going to be talking about, I think it's the best produced album. The sound on it, it's one of those records that people test new stereos with, isn't it? And yeah, no, it's a great album. There are other Pink Floyd albums I like better, but there's no doubting that this is a high class quality album.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's one of the best produced Pink Floyd albums. Yeah, no arguments. Great album.
Yeah. Now, number two is probably an album, I think, Peter, that you like a whole lot more than I do, which is not to say I don't like it, but it's definitely more in your wheelhouse than mine. 50 million copies sold worldwide, AC/DC Back in Black.
Yeah, great album. This was going to be the Bon Scott album that was going to break big, but we know how that ended. Bon passing in '79, and this is an example of a changeover in lead singer, and it's kind of been seamless and part of a skyrocketing trajectory for the band. Look, it's a classic album. Mutt Lange has done a production on it, like it or loathe it. It's quite effective, and it sort of broke them big in America. And I think what Mutt Lange did is he smoothed the edges of AC/DC, the gang vocals and the production where there's real clear-cut space between the notes, and then put focus on Angus's guitar. So 3 elements: gang vocals, space between the notes, clear separation of the instruments, and Anguson's guitar, and they're on their way. And when you
Yeah.
listen to it, it's just really stripped down, simple riffs. Back in Black, it's a riff that's conquered America. And I did a show with Peter Wicks on Rock Daydream Nation. We were talking about AC/DC, and in Australia, Back in Black was not one of the more popular songs on the album. I would have said Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution. You Shook Me All Night Long. There are other songs on the album that got more airplay, but out of all the tracks, we kind of, in the day, we regarded that as a deep cut. That sort of elevated the album as the numero uno song, and it sort of conquered America.
Yeah.
AC/DC had a bit of a pop sensibility, so
Mm.
one of those rare hard rock bands that featured in the top 10, played on radio, played in clubs,
Yeah.
or at least in Australia. I'm not sure in the rest of the world, but sort of the clubs I was going to, they'd play it and people would have a bit of a boogie too. So what can I say? My preference has always been Bon. I like the little bit rough and ready, but lightning in a bottle. and it's cross generational, and it keeps on
Mm.
going. And if you look
Yeah,
at it, AC/DC's they've just done a tour of Australia. You look at the song set, so many tracks off that album.
yeah, absolutely. You know, if I was going to own one um Brian Johnson era AC/DC album, this would be the one I'd own. Um, this is before Mutt Lange's production got obnoxious, which it definitely would later in the 80s. But he took their hard rock sound and made it radio friendly. And I think that's why it was such a huge album in the US. So, and the songs, I mean, you know, Back in Black's a great song. You Shook Me All Night Long is a great song. You know, there's some really good stuff on here. I'm not the hugest AC/DC fan, as you well know, Peter, but I give this album its props. It's a fine hard rock album.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it's definitely, and this is a crossover album where it
Yeah,
has crossed from the genre fans into the mainstream.
yeah,
And it's got that
absolutely.
appeal, and Mutt Lange, he's a big factor
Yeah.
in making them accessible.
Yeah. And then the number one best-selling album of all time worldwide will come as a surprise to precisely nobody. It's Thriller by Michael Jackson, 70 million copies sold.
Yeah, this is in the album age, though. Remember that. That's
Mm,
something that we've got to talk about. That there are a lot more albums in the vinyl age that were being sold than CDs. But yeah, absolutely phenomenal. Um, this album produced or spawned, I think, 9 singles. Phenomenal, single after single after single. And I mean, if you're going to start your album, your first single as Billie Jean and follow up with Beat It with that wonderful Eddie Van Halen guitar solo line and those fantastic videos, and then the Thriller, which they got John Landis, the American director of American Werewolf in London, to do a little mini werewolf movie. It's all part of pop culture.
yeah.
But there's a lot of elements of this album that are very much of the 80s
Mm,
as a time capsule. But there are certain songs that break out of that and are hot now and still get played to this very, very day. Michael hasn't been cancelled. There is a little bit of grey area about his personal life, which is quite remarkable. That's probably a story for another day. But there are the singles, I guess, are such uber hits. They've been able to transcend the times and become part of pop culture to this very day.
yeah.
But the rest of it, the album, the other singles that got released, like Pretty Young Thing, um, some other songs that just escaped me. If I had the song list, I could tell you. Probably a bit more left in the 80s. So
Mm,
I think whether it's hot or not, I think it's a bit of both. There are some things that are a bit more
yeah.
capsuled of its time, the look, the fashion, maybe the video clips, but there are two songs, Billie Jean and Beat It, hot to
Yeah,
this day.
absolutely. Fun fact here, Peter. Did you know that Billie Jean was actually the second single off this album? The first single off this album was The Girl Is Mine, the duet with Paul McCartney.
Yeah, you got me.
And
You're right.
and of all the singles, I love Macca, as you know, he's one of my favorite artists of all time. But of all the singles on this album, it's the weakest song. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't like The Girl Is Mine at all.
Yeah, that's a stunt single.
It's
I think it's a stunt single. So
yeah. But yeah. No, I mean the other single that I always really liked on this album is Wanna Be Starting Something. That is funky as hell.
it is,
Um,
but
but then you have the song Human Nature, which is basically a Toto song. It was written by a couple of the guys from Toto.
mm,
Um, and yeah. No, there, I will admit there's a couple of songs on this album that are a bit fillery, but
Yeah, but do you agree it's a half-half proposition? There's half of this whole songs from this era are hot, and half of it
Yeah,
are a bit more dated, much more of its
yeah,
time.
absolutely. So that's the top 10 best-selling albums worldwide. Let's have a look at the Australian ones. We'll zip through this a little quicker probably because some of them are going to be the same,
Yeah,
obviously, but
yeah.
there's definitely some different ones here. Starting at number 10, 1 million copies sold here in Australia. This is an absolute shame to us, Peter. How could we possibly let this be in our top 10? It's Michael Bublé's Christmas album.
Yeah, look, it's a seasonal stocking filler, and people get a little bit crazy at that time of the year. They have too much eggnog, and they go down to Costco or Coles or Brash's and get a bit excited and buy a Christmas album. So when you go into the
Yeah,
record store, there's a bit of real estate in the front, and they have all the Christmas albums, and um, people buy it because they go, "Ooh, what am I going to play on Christmas Day?" You've got to play Christmas
mm,
music, and they pick that. So,
yeah,
cultural significance, whether it's hot or not, is zero, except
yeah.
for 1 or 2 days of the year.
Yeah. No, I've never been a Michael Bublé fan. I like that style of music, but I think he is just completely plastic. He doesn't do it for me at all as a crooner. And I like some Christmas music, but not this. No,
Yeah,
no, definitely not.
I'd rather listen to Davy Creighton sing Christmas carols than Michael Bublé. That's a shout out to you, Davy, if you're
But
watching.
yeah, he'll be watching. Um, Number 9, Jagged Little Pill, Alanis Morissette. We've already discussed this album, and it's in a
Repeat.
similar position, number 10 versus number 9.
Yeah,
So it sold similarly here. It sold 1.03 million copies here in Australia.
yeah, yeah. Well, it just goes to show this was an album that appealed geographically all around the world. So
Yeah.
it broke down barriers.
Yeah. At number 8, we've got the first of two Aussie artists that are in this top 10, Peter. Harrison Copp's going to absolutely love this. It's Delta Goodrem with Innocent Eyes. 1.05 million copies sold here in Australia.
Yeah, look, she was hot for a period off this album. Um, you know, there are some very decent singles off this, and she had a lot of charm. There was a little bit of a sort of an Olivia Newton-John innocence or sweetness about her, and she was definitely a bright new thing. But I have to say, I think that's the honeymoon is over. I don't think people regard her in the same way, and her fan base is dissipated, and uh, she could have been a contender because off this
Mm.
album she had some inroads into the UK, but alas, it was not meant to be. But if I was going to play whether she's hot or not, I don't think she's as hot as she was on this album. I think her fan base
Yeah.
has definitely eroded away, and alas, it was probably a fad for one album or two.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And yeah, no, it's good pop music. She played the piano as well as sang, and I have to say she's probably of all the pop stars that got their start on Home and Away and Neighbours, she'd have to be the most sort of substantive of them, I think. So
Yeah,
many of them was kind of vapid, Stock Aitken Waterman pop. You know, Kylie ended up transcending that, and she's like a different category altogether. But most of the rest of them were, yeah, really not much substance there.
yeah. I have this theory when pop stars become judges on talent shows, it sort of loosens their credibility. And
Mm,
personally, and maybe borrowing your words, and I might make a T-shirt. It's me, not you.
mm,
There was an annoyance factor. I found, just I don't know. It's a sort of thing like with a lot of pop stars that go on to the other side. People sort of view them differently, and I don't think that might have done her audience base any favors in being
yeah,
a judge on The Voice or Australian Idol or yeah, that's probably a show for a different day. But yeah, I don't think it did her any favors. But that's it's probably
Yeah,
a me thing, and it's a personal opinion.
yeah. It's yeah, I kind of agree with you. But now, much like our top 10 worldwide, our number seven, six, and five all have very similar sales figures. So I've just got them in the order that I got them off this list. And number seven, 1.19 million copies sold here in Australia alone, is Adele with 21.
Well, don't know what to say. Oh, um, very much of a time. I think she's an interesting artist live. Um, she's very much a show woman, but I don't like her. I don't like her
Mm,
music. I think this is a bit one note. Um, yeah, I, I I don't know if I like her music. I don't understand it, but it has appealed to a lot of people. I think her charm is that she comes across as a very sort of an everyday, the girl next door, bit working class. She swears a lot, sort of the chick you'd see in a pub, whether it's in Manchester, Liverpool. She's probably like the female version of Oasis, appeals to the
mm,
every person, and that's why she's sold a squillion copies. But I find the music to be very samey, and she's got a wonderful set of pipes. But I'd love her to interpret like Nina Simone, or do something jazzy, or maybe do an album of trip hop, something a little bit smoky, a little bit cutting edge. It's all very safe, and I think she's retired. She's really quit because she had a lot of problems in setting up a one woman show in Vegas. And there were she pulled out a lot of shows, didn't want to perform, and then it was on, it was off. There was a lot of drama, and I think she's retired. But if she ever decides to go back to recording, I'd like her to do something a little bit more adventurous than those three albums that she has done,
yeah.
because it's all a bit samey to me. What do you think?
Yeah.
Do you agree with a lot of what
Yeah.
I've just said?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm not a huge fan of her music, but I admire her as a singer. She's got a hell of a voice.
Yeah.
She's obviously, she's made the top 10 here in Australia, but not worldwide, which suggests to me that she wasn't as big in the US in particular as she was in other parts of the world. And but yeah, obviously huge here in Australia. You couldn't avoid that album when it came out.
Yeah, but alas, it's a moment in time because I don't hear it much anymore. So
Mm,
again, I think it's a little bit of Alanis Morissette. It's a time capsule where things go viral. It's like in YouTube. One of our
yeah.
clips may go viral and get millions of views, and then it's not repeated. It's just a moment of time. And some of these albums are equivalent to something going viral, where it's shared. It picks up a moment where people gravitate to that style of music. Um, do you think that um, Adele was the stepping stones for Adele were there were a lot of female soul singers that came out of the UK.
Yeah.
Do you think the stepping stone was leading to her from those predecessors, those previous singers?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the one that really comes to mind for me, which was, from the sort of late 80s, is Sam Brown. Um, with that she had that huge hit with the song Stop. And that makes me think of Adele and that sort of thing. But but yeah, I mean, obviously she was kind of the culmination of something, and then it hasn't gone on to further. I mean, the couple of albums she put out after this one sold well, but they obviously weren't the huge blockbusters that this album was.
Yeah. like I'm thinking like an Amy Winehouse.
Oh yes, yes,
Yeah, because there were a lot of singers that came out in that era that were sort of replicating Amy Winehouse, that real smoky, jazzy voice. And I kind of sort of related to Adele, a couple of degrees of separation. And maybe
mm,
she was the more acceptable version of that style of music that was coming out of England. And it was the natural progression.
yeah, quite possibly.
Mm.
But interesting thing to sort of think about and ponder, I think.
Yeah. And another thing, I think a lot of people that bought Adele albums probably didn't buy many albums during the course of the year. A lot of folks that I know that had that album only have about 12 CDs in their collection.
Yeah,
Seriously. So if they're inspired to buy something, go to JB's or whatnot. Oh, that's their CD for the year. So
yeah, yeah. No, that's quite possible too. Um, Number six, also 1.19 million copies sold here in Australia alone. I remember when this album came out and what a phenomenon it was. Dire Straits Brothers in Arms.
oh, good. Oh. Um, a couple of things we need to unpack. Every stereo store that I've been to, they play this album. Money for Nothing with the drums, the start. I want my MTV. I'm sick of it. It's a cliche. So there should be a rule, should be legislation put down in this country that every single stereo store must not play that song. I've had enough. No more. You're smiling because you know it's true.
Yeah,
Um, it's a bit of a dull album. I love this band. Love Over Gold is their peak. I thought there was such greatness in this, where you had this guy that had lyrics like Bob Dylan, sounded like Bob Dylan, but they had a feel to them live that had a bit of grandeur of a Bruce Springsteen. There was all these different sort of elements to the band. They were quite exciting, and they put out an album that was just built for hot dogs, Coors beer, and American stadiums. It was so square. The Walk of Life. Um, Brothers in Arms. I'm just trying to think of some other songs. I saw this concert live, queued up for 10 hours. This is in the days when you used to queue up at Ticketek,
mm,
and you wouldn't do it on the internet, and you might be lucky to get a good ticket. And I saw this show, and it was so boring. Mark Knopfler was doing a guitar solo, and three-quarters of the way through the guitar solo, he looked at his watch and just to see what the time was. I know they're a much better band. I own a lot of Dire Straits. I think their early stuff was kind of cutting edge, which is post-punk. Um, for me, Love Over Gold was their peak, but this album, they went for stadium rock, and they were a much less interesting band. What do you think?
yeah. Well, I've done a Dire Straits studio albums ranked. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you on both counts. Love Over Gold is my favorite Dire Straits album. Closely followed by Making Movies because I think that album's brilliant too.
Love it.
But this album didn't rank particularly highly for me because again, like we were talking about earlier, I never ever ever need to hear Money for Nothing again as long as I live. Um, So Far Away is kind of bland. Walk of Life, as you say, it's got that sort of cheesy thing going to it. I think there's some better stuff on side two. There's some of the deep cuts on side two, I think, are better. Um, uh, Things like what am I thinking of? Right Across the River. I always liked that song. But
Yeah. But do you agree
but
it's very much they were sort of modeling this for
yeah.
stadium rock?
Yeah, absolutely. They were obviously, I think, very much aiming this album at America. And I don't think it particularly worked because I don't think this album was massive in America. Certainly not the way it was here. I mean, here it was ridiculous. They came, they toured here. They toured here for like a couple of months. You know, they
Yeah,
played however many shows in Sydney and Melbourne. They played shows, and one thing I will give them credit for, Peter, is when they did that huge tour here in Australia on Brothers in Arms, they didn't just play the capital cities. You know, they went to Mackay and places like that and played shows there as well. And I respect when a band is actually prepared to, go out of just Sydney and Melbourne and play some of the regional cities. But yeah, no, it's not one of my favorite Dire Straits albums, but
yeah. Hey, buddy, I've got to correct you because I
yeah.
just looked it up. It went 9 platinum in America. It was
Oh
huge.
well, there you go.
Yeah,
Well, there you go.
I had it in my mind that Walk of Life actually went top five, and I think Money for Nothing went number one. So
Yeah,
yeah, 15 times platinum in UK,
yeah, yeah,
Australia 17 times, as we are
yeah,
talking about now.
yeah.
Ridiculous amounts. But can I talk briefly about Money for Nothing? I've never had a song that has so much build up at the start, and then it just deflates um, like a balloon at a garbage concert. It just sort of it. There's so much, there's so much build up and Sting's going, I want my TV, and the drums come up, and then it just deflates into this little basic guitar line and this really observational lyric that just goes nowhere. It's sort of like you
Mm,
go to the peak and then just you dive. I think Martin Popoff did a show on his podcast about shows that's about songs that start off with a crescendo and then just deflate very quickly. Well, this is one of those.
yeah, yeah.
Have you? Has that ever bugged you?
Yeah, well, I was never, even back in 1985, the Money for Nothing was not one of my favorite songs on this
Not
album.
even the start.
So,
It didn't excite you a little bit. It's like,
yeah, the,
oh,
the
this is
start was
interesting.
kind
Yeah,
of cool, but
yeah.
yeah, it was never my favorite song on the album. So, yeah, I mean, but it was huge here, this album. Then this is going to surprise people. Number five in Australia, fifth best-selling album of all time,
Can I
Michael
guess?
Jackson's
Oh,
Thriller.
oh, okay. I was going to say something else, but Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Yeah, only number five. There are four albums in Australia that have sold more copies than Thriller.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I got nothing to say on that.
yeah. Number
Nothing much.
four surprised me. Number four surprised me. 1.33 million copies sold here in Australia alone. It's Eminem with the Eminem Show.
Yeah, he's one of the best rappers of his generation, and in that period, he was unbeatable. His wordplay was just very clever. Again, he was, very controversial, and a lot of people were taking a lot of his wordplay as literally, but he was just playing a character and using that character to be a social observation, um, a social observer.
Yeah.
So, look, probably not a lot of people that watch these channels like hip hop, but in the hip hop world, I have a passing interest, and he's definitely right at the top for that at that particular period of time.
Yeah. No, for sure. I just find it interesting that this album is a top, number four best-selling album in Australia, but worldwide it didn't even make the top 10. So, I
Hmm.
mean, Australia obviously had an even bigger affinity for Eminem than maybe the rest of the world did.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'd like to know what per capita, what the ratio would have been like.
Mm.
Mm.
But number three is an album we've done a show on. It's the other Australian on this list. It's John Farnham with Whispering Jack. 1.68 million copies sold just in Australia. And just so that people know, this album's 40 years old. Today, there's only about 25 million people in Australia. Back then, it was more like 15. So it was a ridiculous amount of albums to sell.
Yeah, well, I think let me take over, and I'll just say because I don't want you to get any more flack than you did for that show. So I'll take over from here. Don't listen to him. It's got a lot of charm. I like a lot of the songs. You're the Voice is like an Australian anthem. Enough said.
Yeah. Again, I throw that song in the category of songs I never need to hear again.
Oh, you just couldn't help
Um,
yourself. You're going to get
no,
hate
I
mail
can't.
again. You're going to get hate mail again.
Uh,
Seriously. Anyway,
now,
check out the show, folks, too.
yeah,
We'll put the
absolutely. I'll leave a
put
link in the
put the
description.
link for
Yeah,
that one too.
yeah, absolutely. Now I was ashamed, Peter, that our number 10 best-selling album was Michael Bublé. I'm even more ashamed that our number 2 best-selling album is Shania Twain with Come On Over. 1.75 million copies sold.
Well, you know, it's uh, I don't know what to say.
Yeah. And then the number 1, the best-selling album in Australia ever. 1.82 million copies sold. Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell.
Yeah, cultural phenomenon.
Mm.
I think Meatloaf has definitely been one of the biggest artists in Australia. He's come out here many, many times in all his glory. And yeah, I just think today, as of 2025, 2026, it's not really a hot album. It's very much of its time. But I think I'll say it again, and I'm sorry, apologies to repeat myself. I think he was hot 78 to 80 for those 3 years because it was a slow build. And then in the 80s, it was very cold because he tried to do a sequel. He didn't reconnect with Jim Steinman, and he did a lot of albums like Bad Attitude was one of them, and A Dead Ringer. These are names, maybe I've got them wrong, but I'm sure our viewers will correct it. It took it to early 90s where he did a Bad Out of Hell 2, and he did that song. What was that song he did?
Oh, I'd do anything for love, but I won't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And his career went up again,
Yeah.
and
And
the sales for that album went up again, and it became hot again. It was sort of like Lazarus. It
yeah.
resurrected, and then it's sort of he went into the RSL circuit, club circuit, playing sporting events, and yeah,
But Bat Out of Hell here in Australia, it still sells. It still sells. I don't know whether it's all the oldies buying new copies of it or what, but it does still sell.
I don't think it's
So
cross generational though. I don't. I go to
no,
I go to record fairs and I see a lot of copies of that, and I don't see people tucking it under their arm and buying it. I
yeah,
know. I know. I think it's. I think that his fans are probably dying. I don't see a cross generational. Um, who would be influenced by Meatloaf? Maybe the Killers on their second album, Sam's Town. That
mm,
had a little bit of a Bat Out of Hell influence to it, but I don't hear a lot of it. You see, because his was sort of like a parody of Bruce Springsteen. I always think that he's based his career on being a parody of that Born to Run era, the
yeah,
early Bruce Springsteen bands. So I think more people are sort of influenced by the originator than
yeah,
this concept blues concept album. I
yeah,
don't know.
possibly. But before we finish up, Peter, I just wanted to quickly talk about the worldwide albums from the top 10 that aren't on the Australian top 10. There's no AC/DC Back in Black. That's a disgrace. For an Australian band not to be in the Australian top 10 when they're the second best-selling album of all time, that's a to quote you, that's a real head scratch.
It's a head scratch, but I think that there are more Bon Scott fans.
Mm,
And I don't think those Bon Scott albums broke into the mainstream. They were, I wouldn't say they're genre specific, but there was definitely a fenced in group of fans that were very feverish, bought it in big numbers, but it didn't quite break into the mainstream that your
yeah,
next door neighbor or your neighbor would own a copy of Highway to Hell or Parage or TNT.
yeah.
That's my explanation.
No, no Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon.
That's a head scratch.
Yeah. No Eagles Hotel California.
That's a head scratch. However, is the very best of the Eagles. If
Yeah.
we were going to
Well,
insert a compilation album, would that be in it?
I don't think it was, if memory serves me correctly.
Okay.
So,
That's
I don't know that the Eagles were as big in Australia as they were in the US. You know, even back in the day, they were big, but I don't think they were as big as they were in the US
yeah,
because,
possibly.
um, no Fleetwood Mac rumors.
You're kidding me.
No,
We
Fleetwood
need to
Mac
re
rumors was not in the Australian top 10.
I reckon if they did a count today, it'd definitely be there.
And then the last one I will point out, no Led Zeppelin 4.
Wow. Inexplicable.
So. So there you have it, everyone. That's a comparison of the worldwide top 10 best-selling albums with Australia's top 10 best-selling albums. Peter, thank you so much for joining me. This has been an absolute hoot, this show.
It is. I'm going to go to the bar, have a beer, and just sit down and relax because, yeah, it's been a great hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
If any of my viewers are not already subscribed to Rock Daydream Nation, which, as I always say, I find very hard to believe, I will leave a link in the description as I always do. Please go over there, subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation, and tell Peter that Bicycle Eggs sent you.
Absolutely.
Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to see any of my other special episodes, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my studio albums ranked shows, I have a playlist for those. And if you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, like Rock Daydream Nation, where I've been on a bunch of times, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter, and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated Bicyclelegs Facebook page and Bicyclelegs merch. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
All the best.